All right, Shalom. First and foremost, I'm going to start this lesson by giving all praises, glory, and honor unto Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Shai Bahasham, Racha Kodash. All right, double honors as always to our elders and apostles of Great Millstone who taught us all this truth and who also rule and teach well. And Shalom to all the Achim in this truth and sincerity, starting with the 144,000 and the one third of the nation of Israel, which we are fighting to be a part of. And this is your brother Chabar Yakal coming back, Lord willing, with another quick and edifying lesson. And the title is The House of David is Back. All right. Matter of fact, I'm going to put back being built. It's back slash being built, you know, which even though it's being built, it's still back. You know, the house of David of old is back today. And I'm going to get, you know, some precepts to show that, all right? And to just, you know, just explain a little bit more of the lesson, you know, in this, and just to, you know, give a little context of the significance of the house of David. Pretty much, you know, the house of David is, the house underneath, you know, King David. And pretty much all the people that were with him on his side, that's the house of David. His mighty men, I believe it was 36 mighty men. I could be wrong on that. Matter of fact, I'm gonna do this. I was trying to make a depiction of Yahweh Shai. I was still working on it. Salakia. But David, because it kind of slips my mind right now. 37, not 36, 37. And that could be found in 2 Samuel 23 and 39, which I got to go through 1st and 2nd Samuels again. You know, Lord willing, I'll do that soon. I may even do some lessons on it, you know, Lord willing. But so he had 37 mighty men. You know, he had musicians. You know, he had the sons of Korah. He had Jeduthun. I can't pronounce his name. Jeduthun, something like that. I cannot pronounce his name, but he was one of the musicians. You know, of course you had what was his name, Asaph. You know, so that's the house of David. You know, everyone that was on his side. That's the house that the Lord was dealing with. All right, just like I said, I'm just giving some context. And that same house is back. All right. Matter of fact, I just thought of a scripture real quick. Seek. Lord willing, I can find it. Hosea chapter 3 and verse 5. And it says, afterward shall the children of Israel return and seek the Lord their God. Which, who are the children of Israel? You so-called blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans. All right, you make up the 12 tribes of Israel. You know, and I still have to, you know, I got some more lessons on, you know, more of the tribes. Lord willing, you know, soon. I'm still trying to do all 12 tribes. You know, I got a few more I got to do. You know, so Lord willing, you know, the Lord gives me the spirit to do that. You know, I hope. But the children of Israel are you so-called blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans, all right? And also Israelite foreigners, okay, who look like the other nations. They don't look like the typical Israelites, but they have the spirit of the Israelite because their bloodline goes back to Israel, you know? It's a spiritual thing. It's a physical thing, but it's a spiritual thing ultimately, you know? And I'm not saying, you know, because you got certain wacky-tacky Christians, you know, they try to talk about being a spiritual Israelite. There's no such thing. It's all according to the bloodline. But it is a spiritual thing when you look at, you know, certain so-called white people, you know, which the so-called white race as a whole are the Edomites. You know, they go back to Esau. And they're the wicked that the Bible speaks of. But the point that I'm trying to make is it's a spiritual thing because you might see a white guy, but he has the spirit of an Israelite, though. So it's a spiritual and a physical thing. You know, it's not just one or the other. But the children that afterwards shall the children of Israel return and seek the Lord their God, which this is a prophecy that's taking place before our very eyes. You know, we return to our nationality of being an Israelite. We're calling ourselves the Israelites now. We're teaching. We're going out on the highways and byways. You know, putting on garments of sackcloth, wearing fringes. You know, not on the job though, and not at Walmart. we don't just wear fringes. You know, everywhere. That's not wise. All right, like certain other camps. We're gonna let you know too. We let you know on video that's not a wise thing to do. You know, we're not ashamed to say that. And then they try to, you know, talk mess about us, you know. But it's like that's you know, I'm gonna just leave that. But it says, and the Lord their God, which his name is Yahweh, which means he is or he exists, and his son's name is Yahweh Shai, which means he saves or he delivers. All right. And David their king, and shall fear the Lord and his goodness in the latter days, which we're at. Showing you this is taking place before our very eyes. But a key point, it says, and David their king. So the children of Israel are going to also seek, when they return to, you know, acknowledging the Bible, you know, acknowledging their true nationality as Israelites, when they return, they're also going to seek David their king. So that has to happen. And for that to happen, there has to be reincarnation, which the word reincarnation means back in the flesh. You always come back as who you are. If you're a man, you're always going to come back as a man. If you're a man that's a musician, you're always going to come back as a musician. You know, if you come back, I mean, if you were, you know, a warrior, you're always going to be that. You're always going to come back as that. And so on and so forth, even with the animals, you know. You know, with women, whatever a woman was, you know, she's going to come back as that. But on the highest level, the prophets, whoever the prophets were, they're always going to come back as the prophets. And Lord willing, were those true righteous prophets, you know. That's our hope, you know, that we're of the house of David, because the prophets were also among the house of David. You know, you had Nathan, all right, you had, of course, Samuel before he passed on, you know. So the prophets were among the house of David as well, all right. Solomon was not only was a king, he was also a prophet, just like David. So for this prophecy to happen, number one, David had to come back. And number two, he had to be alive during this time, during the time of the children of Israel returning to our nationality. And, you know, from testimonies and, you know, and stories, history that we've heard from our elders and apostles, we believe through faith that it was King Masha, that, you know, King Masha is King David, you know, which, I mean, if you don't know who that is, I mean, you could look up GMS King Masha, and hopefully, you know, you could find some videos. But yeah, we believe that from our elders and apostles, all right? So David did come back, you know, and this prophecy was fulfilled because the children of Israel sought after a king, you know, who King David was, all right, is, you know, because, you know, he's coming back. The scripture says the dead in Yahweh Shai shall rise first, all right? First Thessalonians 4, I believe. So I'm going to go ahead and get Amos chapter 9. So like, I got to spit real quick. Sorry about that. This is Amos chapter 9 and verse 11. It says, "In that day will I raise up the tabernacle of David that is fallen." That's the Most High. This is a prophecy. The Most High said he was going to raise up the tabernacle of David that is fallen, because there was 2 Thessalonians, it says there must come a falling away first, you know, and that man is sin be revealed. So the house of David fell, because of that falling away. All right. After Solomon died, technically Solomon's kingdom was the house of David. But after he, died, the kingdom got split. All right. And then you had the southern kingdom, which was Judah, Benjamin, and Levi, and the northern kingdom. All right. But that's how the tabernacle of David fell. All right. Because the house of David, which is the same thing as the tabernacle of David, it's the same thing. It was all 12 tribes, all right? Because he ruled it slips my mind he ruled like 7 years in Hebron. I think it was 7 years in Hebron. Let me look that up because I'm making a point. In Hebron, which fun fact, my name is actually in that word. Uh, how you say Hebron in Hebrew is Chabar one, which means association. Just a little fun Hebrew fun fact. And in Jerusalem, I believe it was 7 years in Hebron. Yeah, 7 years and 6 months in Hebron. Over Judah only, which is the southern kingdom, which later became the southern kingdom after the split. And then 33 years in Jerusalem over all Israel. In total, 40 years. And this is, like I said, this is recorded in 2 Samuel 5 and 4 through 5 and 1 Kings 2 and 11. So it says, and I will raise up his ruins and I will build it as in the days of old. That's reincarnation. Just as it was, the same people, the same king over them, King David, the same, his same mighty men, his advisors, his personal prophets. Like I said, he had Nathan. Well, I don't know. That's probably not the right thing to say. His personal prophets, because the prophets those are the Lord's servants directly. So Salakia, but the prophets that were on his side, Nathan. All those people, those characters, they're all going to come back. That's reincarnation, back in the flesh. It says, and I will build it as in the days of old. That's what you see before you. All these camps, all throughout America and the major cities, all these GMS camps, and true affiliates. I'll say it like Elder Apostle Gabar says it. I'll say it like that. Our true affiliates, that's the house of David, coming back. We believe it, And all the wicked Israelites, that's the house of Saul. The scripture says the house of David, wax stronger and stronger, and vice versa for the house of Saul. The house of Saul wax weaker and weaker. It says that they may possess the remnant of Edom and all the heathen which are called by my name, saith the Lord, power, or it's like the Lord Yahweh B'Shem Yahushai that doeth this. So, slavery of all the other nations was synonymous with the house of David ruling. So the Lord doing that same, the same thing is going to happen again. The house of David is going to possess the remnant of Edom, which that's the elites of Esau. After the destruction, they're going to be in their bunkers, the underground cities that they got, in different parts of the world. They got underground cities. That's the remnant of Edom, the ones who survived when Babylon the Great is destroyed, which Babylon the Great is America and is going to be destroyed with nuclear missiles. But the elites of Esau, the so-called white race, which is Esau, Edom, they're going to survive. All right. And we're going to possess them. Lord willing, we're of the house of David. We're going to possess them. What does that mean? That means they're going to be our servants, our slaves, our handmaids. All right. Let me get this one. I'm going to try to run through these because I'm not trying to make a super dragged out, video. All right, Isaiah 11 and 13, it says, there's also a prophecy that's taking place before your very eyes. All right, it says, the envy also of Ephraim shall depart, and the adversaries of Judah shall be cut off. Ephraim shall not envy Judah, and Judah shall not vex Ephraim. So this, like I mentioned, you have the southern kingdom, Judah, Benjamin, and Levi, which are, the Judah, the American blacks, so-called. Benjamin is the so-called Jamaicans, West Indians, Barbadians. And then you got Levi, which are the so-called Haitians. So Judah, those tribes I just mentioned, shall not vex Ephraim. Who's Ephraim? He's the head tribe of the northern kingdom, which are the so-called Hispanics, Native Americans, Seminole Indian tribes, you know. So basically what it's saying is these tribes are going to put aside their differences and come together, and be one nation again, just like under King Solomon. That's what's happening before your very eyes. You see so-called Hispanic brothers, holding, at camp with so-called, dark-skinned, black brothers, and you also got Israelite foreigners as well. You got brothers who look like so-called white people, but they're amongst the brethren, because the spirits of the prophets are subject unto the prophets. A prophet is always going to come back as that. You can't do nothing to change it. Whatever you were in your past life, you're going to come back. So Lord willing, we were those prophets. All right. I'm going to get this copy. This is 1 Peter 2 and verse 5. It says, ye also as lively stones are built up a spiritual house and holy priesthood. You remember David had the temple, Well, he didn't. He commissioned it to be built for Solomon, Basically, he gave Solomon the blueprint, and Solomon, commissioned the temple to be built. But David did have the Ark of the Covenant, if I'm not mistaken. He had they did have oh man, it was like a tabernacle before they had a temple, if that makes sense. It was the temple before the temple, but it was like a tent. It was like a tabernacle, and that's what David had, and he had priests. What do you think when he ate the showbread? When he was fleeing from Saul, he ate the showbread, and really only the priests were supposed to eat it. But we're a part of that house of David. David was, even though he was a Judite, really, the Lord's making all of us priests, of the house of David. It says, you shall be a nation of kings and priests. All right. It says to offer up spiritual sacrifices acceptable unto the Most High by Yahweh Shai. All right. Which that's giving our bodies as a living sacrifice. All right. Sacrificing our time and energy, doing these lessons, which we do. We enjoy serving the Lord. I'm not complaining. I'm just saying that's a part of the sacrifice, our energy, our time. All right. And last but not least, I'm going to get this. Okay. 1 Corinthians 3:16. Know ye not that ye are the temple of the Most High, and that the Spirit of the Most High dwelleth in you? So there is no church building. Like you got wacky-tacky Christians that think you got to go to a building. We are the building. The individual believers are the building, are the church. The word church goes back to the word ecclesia, which means to be called out. And it says in Proverbs, the first chapter, wisdom crieth without. She uttereth her voice in the streets. So that's where the church is, wherever the believers are, calling out. All right. And we were all called into this thing. The scripture says many are called, but few are chosen. So well, that's pretty much the point. We are the temple. The house of David is being rebuilt. Lord willing, this lesson was edifying. Once again, giving our praises to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem